Life on the frontier of the Wild West. On the edge of civilization, where the land seemed barren and harsh, lived a woman named Martha. Her home stood alone atop a precipitous hill, surrounded by a vast expanse of prairie that blended into the sky in the distant mist. The wind never ceased here. It blew dust from the cracked soil, carried the smell of campfires and wild grasses that rippled in the wind like the sea. The sun rose, red and burning, as if burning everything in its path, making you sweat and squint. In this merciless climate, Martha absorbed all her strength. She was a woman who knew the value of daily labor and the loneliness that became her only companion. Her hands, rough from work, remembered the weight of so many chores: repairing broken fences, fitting saddles for horses, fixing the dilapidated well from which the last of the water flowed. She gathered medicinal herbs on the hillsides, learned to listen to the whisper of the wind and anticipate when a storm was coming. How many years she had lived alone she could no longer count. Once her house was full of laughter, the voices of children and birds singing. But war, disease, and cruel people took away those who were dear to her. Now only the rustle of the wind and the distant howl of coyotes accompanied her nights. Martha rarely allowed herself to be weak. Her heart was hardened by grief and hardship. She knew that only the strongest and most persistent survive on this earth. But despite the harshness of her fate, there was a quiet light burning in her soul, a light of hope that one day everything would change. Every morning she greeted the dawn with a cup of strong coffee, sitting on the porch of her house. The horizon was colored in pinks and golds, as if promising a world where there would be no war, where children could grow up without fear, and the land would be bountiful and fertile. Sometimes, as the light began to filter through the sparse trees, Martha thought of the Comanche tribes, proud and free people with whom she shared a history and a complex relationship, living just over the horizon, where the prairie turned into dense forests. She knew that the boundary between their world and that of the settlers was as thin and fragile as a branch underfoot. The Wild West did not forgive weakness. Here every day was a struggle for water, for land, for the right to be heard. Every drop of sweat and every drop of blood became part of this endless struggle for survival and the tiny happiness that seemed so far away. The wind picked up again, kicking up clouds of dust and bringing with it the cold smell of change. Martha closed the door and looked out the window at the vast expanse, sensing something new in the air, a challenge that was about to turn her life and the lives of everyone she cared about upside down. She took a deep breath. There were cold blizzards ahead, dangerous encounters, and choices that would determine the fates of not only herself, but many others. Snowstorm and the Comanche Child Rescue. Winter in the Wild West was merciless. As the first snowflakes began to fall from the sky, Martha sensed that this winter would be special. Snow swirls swept across the prairie like wild ghosts, pulling everything around them into an icy abyss. That night, the blizzard was gaining strength, and it seemed that even the sky had decided to unleash its fury on the earth. The wind howled outside the walls of her humble home as if warning of approaching danger. Martha knew that in a storm like this, every hour counted. Sitting by the fireplace, she listened to the wind beat against the windows and thought of those who remained outside. Many of her neighbors, settlers and Comanches alike, had been unable to find shelter in this freezing inferno. Suddenly, through the din of the blizzard, Martha heard a thin, hoarse cry. Without hesitation, she ran out into the night gloom, where snow was falling in thick flakes. Her footsteps drowned in the drifts, the cold pounded her face, and her breathing became heavier and heavier. The cries grew louder. Someone, perhaps a child, was very close by and in need of help. The path led her to an old snow-covered ravine, where a baby lay among the drifts, shrouded in scraps of rags. His little body trembled with cold, and Martha's heart clenched with pain and fear. Her hands trembled as she gingerly lifted the baby, feeling its weak breath fight the frost. This child was not of her world. Dark skin, dark hair, facial features belonging to the Comanches. a tribe with whom the settlers had an uneasy relationship. But Martha knew saving him meant giving him a chance at life. She wrapped the baby in her warm blanket and hurried home. That night, the fire in her house burned brighter than usual. Martha rocked the child, stroking his head and whispering words of comfort, forgetting her fear of retribution. For she knew that if the Comanches knew she had saved their child, their reaction would be unpredictable. As the days passed, the weather did not release its icy grip. Martha continued to care for the baby, and to her surprise, people began coming to the door of the house. First one, then several. Finally, one frosty dawn, 100 Comanche warriors came to her porch. They stood in silence, sizing her up. The chief, a tall and statuesque man with deep-set eyes, approached slowly and said,
"You have saved the life of our child. You are our guest, and we will stand by you."
From that day on, Martha and the Comanche tribe formed a fragile but strong alliance that would soon turn the fate of the entire Wild West upside down. An unexpected union and the beginning of change. After the Comanche chiefs gave Martha their word of her deed spread quickly through the area. To many, she seemed like a strange woman, alone, unruly, and bold, which was rare in those days. But it was this that attracted to her the attention of one of the most powerful men in the county, James Harper, a cattleman and baron of the prairies. Baron Harper was a stern and exacting man. His ranch stretched over thousands of acres, and his word was law for miles around. Many respected and feared him at the same time. But behind the rough exterior was a man who knew the value of loneliness and loss. One day, when the blizzard had subsided, his sturdy rider rode up to Martha's house, a black horse, legs covered in dust and mud. James dismounted from the saddle himself, looking up at the house where only wind and snow had recently lived.
"Martha,"
He said, in a voice that sounded tired and determined,
"I heard you saved a Comanche child. That takes courage. There are few such women in our land."
She met his gaze with both pride and wariness.
"I am doing what I must."
Martha replied calmly. The baron took a step forward, as if weighing every word.
"I want to offer you union through marriage. You know how we do it. You are ugly, many will say, but your character, it's more valuable than any beauty. Together, we can protect our lands and our families. Don't you agree?"
For Martha, the proposal was unexpected and contradictory. There was no room in her heart for romance, only calculation and survival. But she knew it was a chance to strengthen her position and keep the peace.
"I agree,"
She said firmly. Theirs was not a marriage of love. It was a bargain, a union of the strong, the determined, and the stubborn. The first days in the baron's house had been full of tension, two characters clashing and sparking, each trying to prove their superiority. James was not accustomed to tolerate disobedience, and Martha did not want to lose her independence. But gradually, their relationship began to change. She taught him to see the world differently, and he opened the door to a new world of opportunity and power. Every day, the baron was more and more surprised. In front of him was a woman with a sharp mind, determination, and kindness, which was impossible to ignore. And then one day, with light snow falling outside the windows, James said to Martha for the first time,
"You're changing me. I didn't think it was possible."
It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the two of them, but for the entire region where fear and cruelty ruled. The widow and orphan's reception. The beginning of a new family. Spring was slowly coming to the prairie, as if revitalizing the land after a long winter's hibernation. Snow drifts melted under the warm rays of the sun, filling the air with the freshness and scent of wet grass. The birds were beginning to return, and their singing filled the ranch with a special tranquility that felt like the beginning of something new. But despite the beauty of the awakening nature, Martha's heart was still warmed by the cold of the storms she had endured during the winter, the cold of trial, pain, and loneliness. From the moment of her union with James Harper, growing stronger every day, the woman felt that her strength lay not only in her ability to hold her own, but also in her ability to help others. One day a rider rode up to the ranch, haggard, disheveled, his face covered with dust and fatigue. It was Thomas, Martha's old friend, and the one she trusted most. His eyes, full of anxiety, met her gaze quickly.
"Martha,"
He said, breathing heavily.
"I've met Anna. She is a widow. Her husband was killed in a recent skirmish with the raiders. She has 3 children. They're homeless, hungry, and tired. They need help."
Martha listened intently, feeling her heart clench at the pain of another's distress. She looked at James, and a silent dialogue slipped between them. Yes, we can take them in. We have to. In the cozy living room of the ranch, by the fire, they met Martha, James, and Anna and her children. When Anna appeared on the doorstep, her eyes were full of a mixture of fear and hope. Hidden behind her back were 3 children, 2 boys, tired and thin, and a little girl who clung tenaciously to her mother. Their clothes were worn and torn, smelling of damp and road dust. Their faces were tired, but they had a thirst for life and a desire to believe. Martha held out her hand gently.
You are safe here. Welcome home.
The first evening was spent in quiet introductions and cautious glances, but the next day a new life of labor, worry, and change began. Martha taught the children to read and write, explained how to run the household, and James provided protection, food, and shelter. Anna, despite the weight of her grief, gradually blossomed, finding hope and meaning in her new family. However, life was never easy in the Wild West. Enemies did not slumber. The envy of neighbors to the success of the Baron, and old conflicts lingered in the shadows, threatening to erupt at any moment. But the united family met every challenge with fortitude. Every day had its battles, for every piece of bread, for every peaceful evening by the fire. But there were also joys, the first steps of babies, the laughter of children, quiet declarations of love, support for each other. With every hour that passed, this family grew stronger. For Martha, for James, for Anna and her children, this was not just a home, but the hope of a new life, where evil would no longer decide fate. The threat, attack, and trial of the family. In summer, the prairie seemed almost serene. Tall grass swayed in the light breeze, birds sang their songs, and eagles soared slowly in the cloudless sky. But behind this peaceful picture was a tension that was building up with each passing week. The news that Martha and James had united their fortunes and taken in a widow and her children spread through the neighborhood and aroused not only respect but also a shadow of envy. At times, whispers and threats were heard at night as neighbors, dissatisfied with the Baron's power and growing influence, discussed how to end their prosperity. And then, one dark night, when the moon was hidden behind the clouds, there was the sharp sound of gunshots. It was an attack, a gang of marauders determined to strike first to break the spirit of those who were disgusted with them. Martha, sleeping in her room, was instantly awakened by the noise. Her heart raced, her instincts calling for a fight. She quickly grabbed a lit kerosene lantern and ran out into the hallway, where screams and gunshots filled the air. James was already fighting at the doorway, his face serious and his eyes full of determination. Several men stood nearby, ready to defend the ranch to their last breath.
Quickly!
Martha shouted.
Anna and the children must be in the cellar.
Anna, terrified, gathered with the children and hurried downstairs, where there was a small room set up as a shelter. The sounds of battle grew louder and louder. Horses neighing, shots ricocheting off the walls of the house, the rumble of fighting echoing around the neighborhood. Martha was no warrior, but her courage and will were stronger than most. She took the rifle and stood beside James, covering the entrance. At one point, her eyes met the gaze of her attacker, a young, angry man who didn't realize she was willing to give her life for her family.
Get out!
Shouted Martha, and her voice was trembling but determined. The fight went on for hours. Blood and dust mingled underfoot, but Martha and her allies did not give up. They weren't just defending a home, they were defending a dream of peace, of family, of a future. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, There was silence. The gang was defeated. Many of its members had fled or been captured. Martha sank to her knees, breathing heavily. James standing beside her, wounded but alive. Anna emerged from the shelter with the children, tears of joy and relief glistening on her cheeks.
We did it.
Martha said quietly.
And together.
In that moment, everyone realized that they were no longer just settlers, no longer just people living in the harsh world of the West. They had become a family that could withstand the test of fire and blood. It was a victory not only over enemies, but also over fear, loneliness, and despair. New life and legacy. The years have flown by like the wind over the prairie. Martha and James, who had once been lonely and rebellious, now lived in a house full of laughter and life. Anna and her children became part of the family, and the ranch became a thriving farm, a symbol of unity and strength. Martha was no longer the lonely woman who battled storms and fears. She became a mother and protector, a woman whose name was respected and feared, but who always remained kind and fair. James, once a harsh baron, discovered a heart, learned to love and trust. The Comanche tribe, whose child was saved in that winter storm, became allies and friends. Old grudges were replaced by mutual respect, and together they built peace on the frontier. Standing on the porch of her house and looking out at the sunset, Martha felt that she had been through it all and stood strong. Her life became a legend that inspired everyone around her to believe in the power of compassion, courage, and family. In a world where once there was chaos and war, now there was hope, thanks to one decision, one heart, and one family that could change the Wild West forever. Dear friends, if you like this story, be sure to put a like and subscribe to the channel. Your comments are very important for us. Tell us what touched or surprised you in this story and what you would like to hear about in the next videos. Thanks for sticking with us. Together, we're creating a space where real, strong, Wild West stories live. See you in the next videos.